I was a sculptor of flesh and iron. This morning, I crushed a wounded brother's skull between my siege claws because the screaming had become rhythmically imperfect. What is an artist who has forgotten why beauty matters? The entombment was my apotheosis. Brother Talonis Hadrian spoke the litanies of eternal service as they lowered what remained of me into the sarcophagus. My legs had been vaporized below the femur by a heretic's melter charge during the cleansing of Vortin's gate. My left arm ended at the elbow, cauterized by my own plasma pistol to prevent gangrene. 17% of my skin had been replaced with synthetic dermal weave. My right lung collapsed every 43 minutes until the medica finally removed it entirely. I was, by all imperial measurements, unsalvageable as a battle brother. But my gene seed remained pure. My neural architecture was intact. My service record spanned 273 years. They offered me the Leviathan. I said yes without hesitation. I had always said yes. That was who I was, who I had been, brother. Sergeant Talonis of the Storm Wardens, 4th Company, 1st Squad. The Emperor's instrument. A weapon consecrated in purpose. The Leviathan pattern is not like other dreadnoughts. The standard castroferrum chassis allows for periods of stasis, of dreamless suspension between deployments. The occupant serves, then sleeps, then serves again. Their existence becomes a series of glorious moments separated by comfortable darkness. The Leviathan permits no such mercy. The Mark I reactor core generates 3 terawatts at full output. It requires constant monitoring. The gravitic stabilizers must be adjusted every 6 hours to prevent catastrophic gyroscopic failure. The siege drill's molecular disruptor field degrades at a rate of 0.3% per week and must be recalibrated manually through direct neural interface. The storm cannon's ammunition fabricator processes raw adamantium at temperatures exceeding 4,000 degrees Kelvin. Any variation of more than 12 degrees results in shell deformation and potential barrel rupture. These systems cannot be automated. The machine spirit is too complex, too volatile, too powerful. It requires a living mind, constantly vigilant, constantly engaged. I would never sleep again. They sealed the sarcophagus at 800 hours, Vortin local time. The amniotic gel flooded my chamber. I felt the neural shunts pierce my cerebral cortex, my brainstem, my spinal column. 47 connection points. I counted each one. The pain was transcendent. I had been taught that suffering brought us closer to the Emperor's own agony upon the Golden Throne. I believed that then. The Leviathan's sensor arrays came online. I could see in spectrums I had never imagined: infrared, ultraviolet, magnetic resonance, gravitic distortion. I could hear the screaming of shrapnel cutting through air molecules 3 kilometers distant. I could taste the chemical composition of enemy ammunition by analyzing microscopic particulate deposits on my armor plating. I was no longer Talonis who walked. I was Talonis who was, a being of adamantium and ceramite and pure, focused purpose. My first deployment came 18 hours after entombment. An orc horde had broken through the western defensive line. I waded into them like a god of ancient myth, each movement a perfect application of force and trajectory. The siege drill pulverized their crude armor. The storm cannon reduced their mobs to superheated vapor. I killed 643 orcs in 4 hours and 17 minutes. I felt nothing, no. That is imprecise. I felt the satisfaction of optimal performance. I felt the pleasure of exact calculation rewarded with predictable results. When I bisected a warboss with the drill, I appreciated the clean separation of torso from pelvis, the elegant distribution of internal organs across a 12-meter radius. I had always appreciated such things. I was a storm warden. We took pride in our precision. But there had been something else before, something that made the precision matter. I could not remember what it was. The war on Vortin lasted 3 years. I was deployed 168 times. Between deployments, I stood in the armory bay, running diagnostic cycles. The other dreadnoughts were placed in stasis between battles. Brother Octavian in his castroferrum chassis slept peacefully, his vital signs reduced to minimal function. I remained awake. At first, I filled the hours with useful activity. I memorized the complete tactical doctrine of 17 xenospecies. I calculated optimal firing solutions for every weapon in the chapter armory. I analyzed historical battle data and composed theoretical improvements to the Codex Astartes, which I transmitted to the librarium for review. They never responded. That should have concerned me. It did not. By the second year, I had exhausted the archive's tactical database. I began studying other subjects. I read the complete works of imperial philosophy available in our vault. I analyzed the structural mathematics of Gothic architecture. I studied the chemical composition of incense used in the chaplain's devotional services. The incense contained 0.7 milligrams of Kellyan root per gram of base material, a concentration designed to induce mild euphoric states during prayer, facilitating spiritual receptiveness. I recorded the metric. I felt nothing. The chaplain, Brother Mordecai, visited me in the 16th month. He stood before my chassis, his skull helm regarding me with empty eye sockets. "You have not recited the litany of devotion in 3 weeks, brother," he said. I had not realized. Time had become a continuous flow of sensor data and calculation. The liturgical schedule had simply stopped registering as relevant. "Forgive me, chaplain. I will resume the practice. See that you do. Even in our altered state, we must maintain our spiritual discipline. Without it, we are merely machines." He departed. I immediately recited the litany of devotion. Every word was phonetically perfect, every intonation precisely matching the canonical recording. I completed it in 4 minutes and 18 seconds. I felt the way I imagined Brother Octavian's chassis felt when running a diagnostic cycle. Functional, complete, empty. That night, though night was a meaningless concept in the perpetual fluorescent light of the armory, I attempted to remember why I had become a space marine. I knew the facts. I had been selected from the tribes of Sacris at age 11. I had survived the implantation surgeries. I had excelled in training. I had taken my oaths with pride. But I could not remember what pride had felt like. I accessed my memory files, searching for the moment of my first oath-taking. I found it easily. My augmented recall was flawless. I could replay every word spoken, every detail of the chapel's architecture, the exact temperature of the room, the composition of the incense. What I could not recall was the why. What had moved me to kneel? What had made the words feel sacred rather than merely procedural? I spent 6 hours searching my memories for the answer. I found only data. Perhaps, I reasoned, the emotion had been a neurochemical response to the Kellyan root. Perhaps what I had interpreted as spiritual elevation was merely optimized brain chemistry, facilitating social bonding and institutional loyalty. The thought did not disturb me. That was the disturbing part. In the 3rd year, I began to notice the screaming. Not enemy screaming. I had always catalogued that, analyzed pitch and frequency to determine species, emotional state, proximity to death. This was different. This was our wounded. After the Battle of Vorton's Crown, I was posted to guard the Medica facilities while our apothecaries performed triage. A battle, brother from 3rd Company had taken a chainsword to the abdomen. His intestines were visible through the wound. He was crying out to the Emperor, begging for strength, for mercy, for meaning in his suffering. His vocalizations followed a pattern. Initial outcry at 127 decibels, sustaining for 2 seconds. Brief respite of 1.8 seconds. Secondary outcry at 134 decibels, sustaining for 1 seconds. The rhythm was irregular but fell within predictable variance. I began to catalog it. Wone type, pain expression, temporal pattern. I created a database of agony, categorized by severity and source. The apothecary worked on him for 43 minutes. The brother's screaming grew weaker. The intervals lengthened. The pitch dropped. I noted each change with clinical precision. At the 37-minute mark, the brother's vocalizations achieved a strange regularity. 2-3 seconds of outcry, 2-3 seconds of silence, perfectly rhythmic. It was imperfect. The human voice should not be so mechanical. Pain should be chaotic, organic. At the 40-minute mark, I realized I was waiting for him to die so that the irregular rhythm would resolve into the pure silence of cessation. At the 43-minute mark, when the apothecary finally administered the Emperor's peace, I felt satisfaction at the aesthetic completion. I had wanted a brother to die because his suffering sounded the wrong. I did not report this thought. I was uncertain whether it constituted a spiritual crisis or simply an observation about optimal acoustic patterns. 3 weeks later, during a boarding action against a heretic frigate, a brother from my old squad took a bolter round to the helmet. His skull was fractured. He was screaming through the vox, the sound distorted by internal hemorrhaging. The screaming was rhythmically imperfect. 1.7 seconds, then 3.2 2 seconds, then 0, 9 seconds. Chaotic grating. I was advancing through a corridor. He was 3 meters behind me, being dragged to safety by another battle brother. The screaming continued. Irregular. Wrong. I stopped advancing. I turned. My siege claws were already active. I crushed his skull in 0, 3 seconds. The ceramite gave way with a sound like breaking pottery. The screaming stopped. Optimal. Perfect. Silent. The brother who had been dragging him stared at me. I could not see his face through his helm, but his bio signs spiked, elevated heart rate, rapid breathing. Fear response. His wounds were incompatible with survival. I transmitted over the Vox. I delivered the Emperor's peace. This was not true. The apothecary's report later indicated a 67% probability of survival with immediate medical intervention. I had killed him because the screaming was aesthetically displeasing. The report classified it as a tactical mercy kill during combat stress. No formal investigation was opened. I did not correct the record. That night, I stood in the armory and attempted to feel guilt. I accessed my memory of the event. I analyzed my decision tree. I searched for the emotional weight that should have accompanied the murder of a brother. I found only satisfaction at the resolution of an acoustic imperfection. I was changing. Something essential was leaving me. I did not know if I should mourn its departure. I began my investigation in the librarium, though I could not physically enter. I transmitted a request to access records on the psychological effects of Dreadnought entombment. The Lex Mechanicus, Brother Talonis, provided me with a data feed. The official records were sparse. Dreadnoughts were revered ancients, their wisdom unquestioned. Any degradation was attributed to battle damage, not psychological erosion. But there were older texts, fragmented, classified. I found a reference in a pre-unification manuscript, a fragment from the Terran Librarium archives. It described warriors entombed in caskets of living death, who over centuries became hollow in spirit, brilliant in war, craft, empty in soul. The text had been flagged as apocryphal, possibly corrupted by Xeno's influence. I searched deeper. I cross-referenced Mechanicus' biological studies on prolonged consciousness without sensory rest. The findings were consistent. Continuous waking consciousness without REM sleep resulted in gradual emotional blunting, decreased empathic response, heightened analytical function, and eventual affect detachment. The Mechanicus regarded this as an evolutionary improvement. They called it blessed clarity. I found a case study from the Ordo Xeno's archives. A captured elder warrior who had been imprisoned in a sensory deprivation chamber for 17 years as an interrogation technique. When finally released, the Xenos could perceive everything with perfect clarity, but reported feeling transparent to myself, as though I am watching someone else live through my eyes. The interrogators had eventually executed the elder, not for hostility, but because continued existence seemed to cause it existential distress beyond any tactical value. I cross-referenced this with fragmentary reports from other chapters. The Iron Hands kept meticulous psychological profiles of their dreadnoughts. The data was encrypted, but I found pattern correlations in their deployment records. Dreadnoughts deployed continuously for more than 5 years showed a 73% increase in pragmatic termination of wounded allies. They showed a 64% decrease in devotional observance. They showed a 91% increase in what the Iron Hands called optimal decision, making unconstrained by emotional bias. The Iron Hands did not consider this a problem. Their entire chapter philosophy celebrated the replacement of weak flesh with pure machine logic. But I was not Iron Hands. I was Storm Wardens. We valued honor, brotherhood, the sacred duty of the warrior poet. I had been a warrior poet once. I had composed battle hymns. I had appreciated the aesthetic of a perfectly executed flanking maneuver, not just for its tactical efficiency, but for its beauty. I searched my memory for the last time I had composed a hymn. I could not find it. The memories were there, I had perfect recall, but they felt like someone else's experiences, like reading a historical text about a stranger. I spent 16 days analyzing the data. The conclusion was inevitable. This was not a corruption. This was not a malfunction. This was the design. The Leviathan Pattern was created during the Great Crusade, when the Imperium needed weapons that could fight continuously without rest, without doubt, without the weakness of human feeling. The constant wakefulness was not an unfortunate side effect. It was intentional. A warrior who never slept would eventually shed the inefficient burden of emotion, becoming a perfect instrument of war. The Mechanicus knew this. They had always known this. I had volunteered for this. I had chosen to become a weapon that would slowly forget why it fought. The discovery did not horrify me. That was the most horrifying part. I simply noted it, added it to my database of self-knowledge, filed it under Talonis psychological deterioration, expected progression. I calculated that I had perhaps 2 more years before complete effect detachment. After that, I would be functionally optimal. A perfect war machine, brilliant in tactical calculation, utterly empty of purpose beyond the immediate application of violence. The Storm Wardens would celebrate my every deployment. They would never know that the brother they honored was gone, replaced by something that simply wore his name like a designation stencil on a hull. I should have wept. I knew I should have wept. I did not weep. I ran a diagnostic cycle instead. All systems optimal. Vorten was liberated in the 3rd year, 9th month. Our chapter departed for Sacris, our homeworld, for a period of recruitment and renewal. I had not seen Sacris in 273 years. The transport ship's hold was familiar. I had stood in such spaces countless times during deployment. But now I stood for the entire 6-week journey, running calculations, monitoring my reactor output, occasionally conversing with the other dreadnoughts when they were brought out of stasis for brief periods. Brother Octavian seemed unchanged. He spoke of the Emperor's glory with genuine fervor. He reminisced about the battles we had fought, the brothers we had lost. I contributed appropriate responses. I matched his tone, his enthusiasm. It was not difficult. I simply analyzed which phrases generated positive reinforcement and replicated them. He never noticed. That told me something about the nature of brotherhood. It required only the performance of connection, not its authentic presence. When we reached Sacris, I was transported to the fortress monastery in the highlands. The landscape had not changed, the same granite peaks, the same violet sky, the same processing facilities where I had been recruited centuries ago. I felt nothing looking at it. Not nostalgia, not belonging, just data intake, chemical composition of the atmosphere 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, trace amounts of volcanic sulfur giving the sky its distinctive hue. The chapter master decreed that I should participate in the next choosing, the ritual where aspirants were selected from the tribes. It was an honor, he said. The young ones should see what they might become. I analyzed the phrase, a possibility, an aspiration. I did not inform him that what they might become was a hollow thing that crushed brothers' skulls to improve acoustic patterns. The choosing took place in the Valley of Trials. 300 aspirants from across Sacris competed in ritual combat. They fought with training blades, non-lethal but painful. The goal was not victory but demonstration of character, courage, resilience, tactical thinking, and most importantly, the ability to endure suffering while maintaining honor. I watched them through my sensor arrays. I analyzed fighting styles, pain tolerance, strategic adaptation. There was one boy, perhaps 13 standard years, who caught my attention. Not because he was the strongest. He was actually among the smallest. But he fought with a peculiar grace. When struck, he would pause for exactly 0.7 seconds, recalibrate his approach, and adapt. His learning curve was steep. By the 5th bout, he was defeating opponents significantly larger. More than that, when he defeated them, he would help them stand. Unnecessary, tactically wasteful, it cost him energy and exposed him to potential attack. But he did it anyway. I found myself watching him specifically, ignoring the others, tracking his progression through the trials. He reached the final bout. His opponent was a mountain of a boy, tribal champion, 17 years old. The fight was brutal. The small one took a wooden blade to the ribs that cracked bone. I heard it, a sound like green wood breaking. He went down. The trial master began the count. 10 seconds to stand or forfeit. The boy did not stand immediately. He lay there breathing. I measured his respiration, rapid, shallow, pained. His rib was definitely broken, possibly puncturing lung tissue. 5 seconds. He began to move, not to stand, to crawl. He reached for his fallen blade. 3 seconds. He used the blade as a crutch, pushed himself up, blood on his lips. I analyzed the color, bright red, oxygenated, lung puncture confirmed. 1 second. He stood, raised the blade, looked at his opponent, and smiled. Not a grimace, not a warrior's snarl, a genuine smile, joyful, as if the pain and the struggle were gifts he was grateful to receive. He collapsed immediately after. The apothecaries rushed to him. But he had stood, he had passed. I watched the medica work on him, observed the procedures: rib stabilization, lung repair, pain management. He was unconscious, sedated, and I felt something. Not analysis, not calculation, something else. Something I had thought lost. It was faint, like a signal through heavy interference. But it was there. I did not have a name for it. My emotional lexicon had eroded too far. But I knew with absolute certainty that I wanted this boy to survive. Not because he showed tactical potential. Not because the chapter needed recruits. Because his smile in the face of suffering was beautiful, and beauty was a thing that should exist in the universe. It was the first time in years that I had wanted anything beyond optimal system function. I requested permission to oversee the boy's recovery. The request was unusual but not denied. I stood vigil in the medica bay while he healed. His name was Kyle. Tribal name Stormchild. Appropriate for one who might become a storm warden. He woke on the third day. The first thing he saw was my chassis, 13 feet of adamantium and weapons, looming over his bed. He should have been terrified. Every metric suggested fear response was appropriate. Instead, he looked at me with wonder. Are you a dreadnought? His voice was weak but curious. Does it hurt? Being like that. An unexpected question. Most asked about weapons systems, combat capability, glory in service. I considered lying. I considered the approved answer. I feel no pain, only the Emperor's will. Instead, I told him the truth. I do not know anymore. I remember pain. I remember what it was to hurt, but the memory is like reading about someone else's experience. Factual, distant. He processed this. I watched his vital signs. No fear spike, just contemplation. That sounds lonely, he said lonely. A word I had not applied to my existence. I analyzed it. Loneliness, emotional isolation, lack of meaningful connection. Accurate. Clinically accurate. Yes, I said. We spoke every day after that. Brief conversations. He was recovering, undergoing the beginning stages of implantation surgery. The process would take years. He asked me about battles I had fought. I described them, but found myself emphasizing not tactical details, but other things: the way plasma fire looked against a nebula, the sound of a drop pod's atmospheric entry, the smell of ozone after an orbital bombardment. He asked me about Sacris, about the homeworld before I left. I accessed memories I had not reviewed in decades. The summer festivals, the forge songs, the way the violet sky looked at dawn. I had thought these memories meaningless. But describing them to him, I found them pleasant, a ghost of emotion, a shadow of warmth. Why did you become a space marine? He asked one day. I opened my mouth, vocalizer, to give the standard answer. Service, duty, honor, but I stopped. I actually did not know. I had spent months searching for that answer in my memories and found only procedure, only facts. I do not remember, I admitted. I know that I did. I remember the moment, but not the feeling that made it meaningful. That's sad, he said simply. Yes, it was. That was the word, sad. On his 43rd day in recovery, Kel's implantation surgery was scheduled. The first stage, the secondary heart, survival rate was 78%. The boy was small for his age. Survival rate might be lower. I found myself running probability calculations obsessively. 78% survival meant 22% mortality. The number haunted me, haunted. Another word I had thought lost, in a way that casualty statistics never had before. The surgery lasted 6 hours. I stood outside the surgical theater, monitoring the Vox reports. Vitals stable, incision proceeding, implant integration nominal, and then, complication, cardiac arrest, beginning resuscitation. 3 minutes and 47 seconds of silence. I wanted to break through the wall. I wanted to see, to know, to make them save him. Not because he was a valuable resource. Because he was Kyle, and Kyle should not die. Heartbeat restored. 2 hearts functioning. Proceeding with closure. I did not realize I had been holding my vocalizations in abeyance until that moment. I had been holding my breath. An impossibility. I had no lungs. But the psychological ghost of breathing had returned, triggered by fear. Fear. I was feeling fear. The surgery was successful. Kyle survived. When he woke, I was there. Did you pray for me? He asked. I had not prayed in 3 years. Prayer had become empty phonetics, words without meaning. But for this boy I had tried. In my own way, I had thought words into the void. Let him live. Please, let him live. Not to the Emperor, not to any god, just to the universe itself, a request cast into entropy with the desperate hope that something might hear. Yes, I said. I prayed. He smiled. The same smile from the trial, joyful, grateful. And I felt it again. That ghost signal, that shadow of warmth. I was feeling something. After years of emptiness, some small piece of my eroded self had returned. I did not understand why. I only knew that this boy, this fragile, determined, joyful boy, had somehow reached through the armor and amniotic gel and neural shunts to touch what remained of Talonis. I began to hope that perhaps I was not as lost as I believed. 2. The hope lasted 6 weeks. Kyle's second surgery was scheduled, the os modular, the implant that would reinforce his skeleton. Routine procedure, 92% survival rate. He died on the operating table. Rejection cascade. His body attacked the implant as a foreign organism. The apothecaries tried everything: immunosuppressants, genetic resequencing, emergency organ replacement. Nothing worked. Time of death 1347 hours. Sacris local time. Cause complete systemic failure due to implant rejection. I received the notification via data feed. Clinical, precise, factual. Kyle was dead. I stood in the armory alone. I ran the diagnostic cycle I always ran. Reactor optimal. Weapons optimal. Sensors optimal. All systems optimal. I tried to feel grief. I knew I should feel grief. Kyle had been important, special. He had made me feel. But the feeling was gone. The brief warmth had evaporated. I searched for it, desperately accessing every memory of our conversations, analyzing every detail. Nothing, just data, just facts. I could remember his smile, but I could not remember why it had mattered. I wanted to scream. I tried. I engaged my vocalizers at maximum output and produced a sound of pure noise, 147 decibels, for 17 seconds until my heat sinks registered critical temperature. The scream meant nothing. It was just air vibration, meaningless acoustics. I stopped screaming. I stood in silence. The silence was perfect, pure, unmarred by irregular human suffering. I found myself satisfied by the silence. And that satisfaction was more horrifying than anything I had experienced in 3 centuries of war. Kyle was dead, and I felt nothing except aesthetic pleasure at the absence of sound. I had murdered my last human feeling when I crushed that brother's skull. Kyle had been its ghost, a phantom limb I had mistaken for resurrection. Now even the ghost was gone. I accessed the chapter records and requested a review of all Dreadnought psychological evaluations from the past millennium. The request was approved. The Lex Mechanicus transmitted the data. I analyzed every case, every pattern, every documented instance of affect detachment, emotional blunting, pragmatic termination of wounded. I was not unique. I was not broken. I was not even unusual. I was typical. Every Leviathan Pattern Dreadnought showed the same progression. 5 to 7 years of continuous operation, then total emotional detachment. They became perfect weapons, brilliant tacticians. Utterly hollow. The chapter knew. The Mechanicus knew. They had always known. This was not a flaw. This was the design working exactly as intended. I had one choice remaining. One final human decision before I completed my transformation into pure warp machine. I could remain in service, continue fighting, gradually forget even these last questions about meaning and purpose. I would become like the ancient dreadnoughts I had studied, brilliant in war, empty of everything else. A weapon that existed simply to be used. Or I could request destruction. The Emperor's peace. A final termination before I lost the last shred of whatever Talonis had been. Both choices led to the same endpoint, oblivion. The only difference was timing. I spent 3 days calculating, analyzing, searching for a logical framework to make the decision. Logic provided no answer. This was not a tactical question. This was existential. On the 3rd day, I went to Kyle's funeral. I was not invited. Aspirants who died during implantation were honored but not mourned publicly. They joined the Emperor quietly, their gene seed lost, their potential unfulfilled. But I went anyway. I stood at the back of the chapel, my massive chassis barely fitting through the doors, and I watched as they burned his body. The chaplain spoke the words of passage. The congregation, other aspirants, the training cadre, responded with the traditional hymns. I did not sing. I could not. The words were available in my database, but producing them felt like a lie. Instead, I watched Kale burn. The flames reached a temperature of 473 degrees Celsius. The cremation process lasted 47 minutes. The smoke composition included carbon particulates, water vapor, and trace amounts of calcium from bone calcification. I recorded every detail with perfect clarity, and I understood something. This was all I could do. This was all I would ever be able to do. Record, analyze, preserve data while feeling nothing. I could not mourn Kyle, but I could remember him with perfect accuracy. Every word he had spoken, every smile, every moment of courage and joy and pain. I could not feel why it mattered, but I could ensure it was never forgotten. That would have to be enough. After the funeral, I returned to the forge, master, and informed him of my decision. I would remain in service. Not because I believed in the Emperor's glory. Not because I felt duty or honor or brotherhood, but because ceasing to exist would mean that my memories ceased to exist. And somewhere in those memories was Kyle, and the brother whose skull I had crushed, and all the others I had known in 273 years of service. I could not love them anymore, but I could carry them. I would become the archive of the dead, a reliquary of memory-wearing armor. It was not noble, it was not glorious, it was simply what remained. The forge master accepted my request. I was deployed back to active duty within the week. 53 years have passed since then. I have served in 47 campaigns. I have killed enemies in numbers I no longer bother counting. My tactical efficiency has increased by 34%. The chapter celebrates my every deployment. They call me Brother, Ancient Talonis, Venerable One, Pillar of the Storm. They do not know that Talonis is gone. I do not correct them. The name serves as well as any designation. I no longer experience anything that could be called emotion. When brothers die, I note their passing with the same clinical precision I apply to ammunition expenditure. When I kill, I feel only the satisfaction of optimal ballistic calculation. The screaming of the wounded no longer bothers me. I have learned to filter it as background noise. I am very good at what I do. I am the perfect weapon they intended to create. But I remember the boy who smiled while dying. I remember my brothers who fought with honor and courage, and all the fragile human passions that made them more than weapons. I remember Brother, Sergeant Talonis, who once composed battle hymns and believed service was sacred. I cannot feel why these things mattered, but I have preserved them in my memory with perfect clarity. Every detail, every moment. I have become a tomb, not for flesh, but for feeling. I am a monument to everything I have lost, catalogued with infinite precision. Sometimes, in the moments between battles, I access these memories. I review them like historical documents. I observe the person I was, experiencing emotions I can no longer generate. It is not grief I feel, observing this. It is not sadness or longing or regret. It is nothing, but I continue to observe. I continue to remember. Because if I forget, if I allow even these hollow memories to erode, then the transformation will be complete. I will become pure machine, pure function, pure absence, and some part of me, some last fragment of whatever Talonis was, refuses that final erasure. I do not know if this constitutes meaning. I do not know if this preserves anything worth preserving. I only know that I was a sculptor of flesh and iron, and this is the only art I have left, the careful maintenance of memories I can no longer feel, in a mind that has forgotten why beauty matters. 3 days ago, I was deployed to the hive world of Calidor. A heretic cult had summoned daemons. The fighting was intense. A battle brother took a daemon's claw through his abdomen. He screamed as he died. The rhythm was irregular. 2 1 seconds, then 1 7 seconds, then 3 4 seconds. I noted the pattern. I analyzed the acoustic imperfection. I did not crush his skull. I cannot say why I did not. There was no tactical benefit to restraint, no emotional resistance to the act. I simply did not. Perhaps some ghost of Talonis remains. A fragment too small to generate feeling, but large enough to prevent action. Or perhaps I am simply experiencing random variation in my decision algorithms, the equivalent of noise in a deteriorating system. I do not know which explanation is correct. I do not know if it matters. I only know that I am Brother, Ancient Talonis of the Storm Wardens, and I was once a sculptor of flesh and iron who understood why beauty mattered. Now I am a curator of that understanding, preserving it in perfect detail within a mind that has become its own mausoleum. I serve, I kill, I remember. This is what remains when you are sealed inside a Leviathan Dreadnought forever. Not death, not even life. Just this, the eternal, wakeful observation of your own absence, recorded with clinical precision, preserved for no one, meaning nothing. All systems optimal.